What if the small copper-colored penny sitting in your pocket right now is hiding a story worth far more than 1 cent? A story that collectors quietly chase, and that a few lucky people have turned into hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Today, we're talking about the 1970 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, it looks ordinary. Just another coin that passed through countless hands, bought groceries, or disappeared into jars and drawers. But behind that simple appearance is a fascinating mix of history, subtle details, and hidden value that most people completely overlook. The 1970 D Lincoln penny was produced in Denver, which is what the small D mint mark under the date represents. This coin is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series, first introduced in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln. By 1970, the design had already been in circulation for decades, showing Lincoln's profile on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. The United States was going through an interesting time in 1970. Inflation was slowly rising, and the cost of producing coins was becoming a growing concern. Pennies were still made mostly of copper, about 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving them that classic reddish-brown color. But behind the scenes, the government was already thinking about future changes to reduce costs. In Denver alone, over 2.8 billion of these pennies were minted in 1970. That's a huge number, which might make you think this coin is extremely common. And in many cases, it is. But here's where things get interesting. Not all 1970 D pennies are created equal. The value of this coin doesn't come from how many were made. It comes from condition, small variations, and certain rare errors that can dramatically increase its worth. Let's take a closer look at the features. On the front, you'll see Abraham Lincoln facing right. Above his head is the word Liberty, and in front of him is the date, 1970, along with the small D mint mark. The phrase "In God We Trust" curves along the top edge. On the back, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny image of Lincoln sitting inside the memorial. Above it reads United States of America, and below it, 1 cent. Now, here's something most people never notice. Even though millions of these coins were produced, the quality varies widely. Some were struck with sharp detail, while others came out weak or worn. Over time, circulation adds scratches, fading, and discoloration. This is why condition matters so much. A 1970 D penny that has been heavily used might still be worth just 1 cent. But a coin that has never been circulated, with a bright surface and sharp details, can be worth significantly more. Collectors use terms like mint state to describe coins that look almost brand new. A high-grade 1970 D penny in mint state condition can sell for anywhere from a few dollars to over $100, depending on how well it has been preserved. But the real excitement comes from error coins. One of the most talked about features in 1970 pennies is the possibility of double die errors. While the most famous double die from that year comes from the Philadelphia Mint, some Denver coins also show minor doubling, where the letters or numbers appear slightly duplicated due to a misalignment during the minting process. These errors are subtle. You might need a magnifying glass to spot them. But for collectors, these small details can make a big difference. There are also other types of errors to look for. Off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned on the coin. Die cracks, which appear as raised lines across the surface. And repunched mint marks, where the D was stamped more than once, slightly offset. Each of these errors tells a story about the minting process. They are like fingerprints, making each coin unique. Now let's talk about real value. Most circulated 1970 D pennies are still only worth a few cents. But in higher grades, prices can rise quickly. For example, a 1970 D penny graded MS65, which means it is in excellent condition with minimal imperfections, can sell for around $10 to $20. Move up to MS67, a much rarer level of preservation, and the value can jump to several $100s. In some cases, exceptional examples have sold for over $2,000 at auction. These are coins with nearly perfect surfaces, strong luster, and no visible damage even under magnification. And then there are error coins. Depending on the type and visibility of the error, these can sell for anywhere from $50 to several $100s, sometimes even more if the error is rare and well-defined. So how do you know if your 1970 D penny is valuable? Start by checking the condition. Look at the surface. Is it shiny or dull? Are the details sharp, especially in Lincoln's hair and the Lincoln Memorial? Coins with strong detail and minimal wear are always more desirable. Next, look closely at the mint mark. Is the D clear and properly positioned? Any unusual doubling or misalignment could be a sign of an error. Then, examine the lettering and numbers. Use a magnifying glass if you can. Look for any signs of doubling, especially around the date and the words Liberty and In God We Trust. Also, check the color. Collectors often categorize pennies as red, red-brown, or brown. Red coins, which still have most of their original copper color, are usually more valuable than darker, aged coins. If you think you've found something special, it might be worth having the coin professionally graded. Grading services evaluate the condition and authenticity of coins, giving them a certified score that can increase buyer confidence. Now here's a fun detail that surprises many people. Even though pennies are often ignored or tossed aside, the total number of collectors searching for rare variations is growing every year. That means coins like the 1970 penny are being looked at more closely than ever before. Another interesting fact is that some people have found valuable coins in everyday places. Old jars, inherited collections, even pocket change. It's not common, but it does happen. And that possibility is part of what makes coin collecting so exciting. There's also a psychological side to it. Coins like the 1970 penny connect us to a specific moment in time. When you hold one, you're holding a piece of history that has traveled through decades, passed from person to person, quietly surviving while the world changed around it. Collectors love that connection. It's not just about money. It's about discovery, history, and the thrill of finding something rare in the most ordinary place. Today, the 1970 Lincoln penny continues to attract attention from both new and experienced collectors. It's accessible, affordable, and full of hidden potential. You don't need a fortune to start searching. You just need curiosity and a careful eye. And that's what makes this coin so fascinating. It sits right at the intersection of everyday life and hidden value. Most people never think twice about a penny. But those who do sometimes uncover something remarkable. So the next time you see a 1970 penny, don't dismiss it. Take a closer look. Check the details. Notice the condition. Because what looks like just another coin could actually be a small piece of history with a story, and possibly a value that goes far beyond 1 cent, and who knows. The next time you reach into your pocket or open an old jar, you might just find one waiting there, quietly holding its secret, ready to be discovered. What if the penny sitting quietly in your pocket right now isn't just loose change, but a small piece of history that collectors are still chasing decades later? Not because it looks flashy, but because of the quiet story it carries. Today, we're uncovering the truth behind the 1973 Lincoln penny, a coin that millions overlooked and a few never stopped searching for. The 1973 Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced in the United States, and at first glance, it looks like any ordinary penny. It carries the familiar face of Abraham Lincoln on the front, with simple lettering and a copper tone that blends in with every other coin from that era. But what makes this coin interesting is not just its appearance, but where it came from, how it was made, and the subtle details that can turn it from common to collectible. Back in 1973, the United States was going through a period of economic pressure. Inflation was rising, and the cost of producing coins, especially pennies, was becoming a concern. Despite that, the U.S. Mint continued producing billions of Lincoln cents to meet circulation demand. The D Mint mark on this coin tells us it was struck at the Denver Mint, one of the primary facilities responsible for mass coin production at the time. In fact, the Denver Mint produced over 3.5 billion pennies in 1973 alone. That's an enormous number, and it's the first reason why many people assume this coin has no real value. After all, how can something so common be worth more than 1 cent? But in the world of coin collecting, rarity is not just about how many were made. It's about how many survived in exceptional condition and whether any unique variations or errors slipped through the system. The design of the 1973 Lincoln penny follows the classic Lincoln cent style that had been in use since 1909. On the front, you see Lincoln's profile, along with the inscriptions "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the year 1973. Just beneath the date is the small but important D Mint mark. On the reverse, the coin features 2 wheat ears. Actually, by 1973, the reverse had already changed to the Lincoln Memorial design. So instead of wheat ears, you'll find the image of the Lincoln Memorial with the words United States of America, 1 cent, and E pluribus unum. One fascinating detail is that if you look very closely at the Lincoln Memorial, you can actually see a tiny figure of Lincoln seated inside. It's one of the smallest detailed portraits ever included on a circulating coin, and many people never notice it. The coin itself is made primarily of copper, about 95% copper and 5% zinc. This gives it that warm, reddish-brown color. However, over time, exposure to air and handling can change its appearance, turning it darker or even giving it a brown tone. Collectors often classify these coins as red, red-brown, or brown, depending on how much original color remains. And that color can make a big difference in value. Now here's where things start to get interesting. While most 1973 pennies are common, certain versions of this coin can be worth significantly more. The key factor is condition. A penny that has been heavily circulated, scratched, or worn down is usually worth just a few cents. But a coin that has been preserved in near-perfect condition with sharp details and original red color can command much higher prices. Some uncirculated 1973 pennies have sold for several dollars, and in rare cases, high-grade examples certified by professional grading services have reached values in the hundreds. These are coins that have been carefully stored for decades, untouched by everyday use. But condition isn't the only factor. Errors and variations can also make a huge difference. During the minting process, mistakes can happen. These mistakes are not supposed to occur, but when they do, they create unique coins that collectors love. For the 1973 penny, some known errors include double die strikes, where the design appears slightly duplicated due to a misalignment during minting. There are also off-center strikes, where the design is not perfectly centered on the coin. And in some rare cases, coins may have been struck on the wrong planchet, meaning the metal disc used was not intended for a penny at all. These error coins are much harder to find, and that scarcity drives their value. A 1973 penny with a noticeable mint error can sell for anywhere from tens to hundreds of dollars, depending on the severity and clarity of the error. There have been documented sales where collectors paid premium prices for high-grade or error versions of this coin. For example, a well-preserved 1973 penny graded at the highest levels can reach over $100 in auctions. While that may not sound life-changing, it's a powerful reminder that even the most ordinary-looking coin can carry hidden value. So, how do you know if you have a valuable 1973 penny? The first step is to check the mint mark. Look just below the date and confirm that there is a small d. Next, examine the coin's condition. Are the details sharp? Is Lincoln's face clearly defined? Does the coin still have a bright red color? Then, take a closer look for any unusual features. Use a magnifying glass if possible. Look for doubling in the letters or numbers. Check if the design is off-center. Notice if anything looks different from a typical penny. These small details can make a big difference. It's also important to be aware of fakes or altered coins. While the 1973 penny is not one of the most commonly counterfeited coins, there are cases where people try to modify coins to make them appear more valuable. For example, someone might attempt to add a mint mark to a coin that didn't originally have 1.to. Protect yourself. Always compare your coin with verified examples. And if you believe you have something special, consider having it evaluated by a professional coin grading service. Authentication and grading not only confirm that the coin is genuine, but also provide an official assessment of its condition, which can significantly impact its value. Here's a fun detail that many people don't realize. Even though billions of 1973 pennies were made, very few have survived in perfect condition. Most were used in everyday transactions, passed from hand to hand, and eventually worn down. That means finding one today in pristine condition is far more difficult than you might expect. Another interesting fact is that pennies from this era were made with much more copper than modern pennies. Today's pennies are mostly zinc with a thin copper coating, but older coins like the 1973 penny have a solid, heavier feel. Some collectors appreciate this not just for historical reasons, but also because it represents a different era of coin production. Collectors love the 1973 Lincoln penny for a variety of reasons. For some, it's part of completing a full set of Lincoln cents. For others, it's about the hunt for high-grade examples or rare errors. And for many, it's simply the idea that something so small and common can still hold a piece of history. There's also a sense of nostalgia attached to coins like this. They remind people of a time when cash was used more frequently, when pennies had a more noticeable role in everyday life, and when even the smallest coin had a story to tell. That in the end, the 1973 Lincoln penny may not be the rarest coin in the world, but it represents something bigger. It shows how value is not always obvious, and how history can be hidden in the most unexpected places. So the next time you come across a penny, don't ignore it. Take a closer look, because sometimes the smallest details can reveal the biggest surprises. And who knows, that simple coin in your hand might just be more than spare change. What if the penny sitting quietly in your pocket right now is more than just 1 cent? What if it's a small piece of history that collectors have been searching for, sometimes paying far more than you'd expect? Today, we're uncovering the story behind the 1978 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that looks ordinary at first glance, yet holds surprising details that most people completely overlook. The 1978 Lincoln penny is part of one of the most recognizable coin series in American history. First introduced in 1909 to honor Abraham Lincoln, this design became a staple of everyday life in the United States. By 1978, millions of these coins were being produced every day, circulating through banks, stores, and households across the country. If you lived during that time, chances are you handled dozens of these pennies without giving them a second thought. Now, here's where things get interesting. When a 1978 Lincoln penny has no mint mark, it simply means it was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. At that time, coins made in Philadelphia often didn't carry a mint mark at all, unlike coins from Denver, which had a D, or San Francisco, which used an S. So technically, a no mint mark penny isn't a mistake. It's exactly how it was supposed to be made. But just because it was common doesn't mean it's worthless. The story of this coin begins in a time when the United States was dealing with rising inflation and changing economic conditions. The cost of producing coins was becoming a serious concern. The Lincoln penny, which had already undergone a major metal change in 1962 when it shifted away from tin, continued to be made primarily of copper in 1978. Specifically, the coin is composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving it that rich, reddish-brown color that many collectors love. Take a closer look at the design, and you'll notice something timeless. On the front or obverse is the profile of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. His face is calm, detailed, and instantly recognizable. Above him, the word Liberty. To the right, the year 1978. And just below, the phrase, "In God We Trust." Flip the coin over, and you'll see the classic wheat reverse was already gone by this time. Instead, you get the Lincoln Memorial design, introduced in 1959. It shows the famous monument in Washington, D.C., with such fine detail that, under magnification, you can actually see a tiny image of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. It's one of those hidden details that most people never noticed. So, if millions of these coins were made, why are collectors still interested in the 1978 no mint mark penny today? The answer lies in condition, errors, and subtle variations. Most 1978 pennies you find in circulation are heavily worn. They've passed through countless hands, machines, and environments. But when you find one in exceptional condition, what collectors call mint state, the value can increase dramatically. A bright, uncirculated 1978 penny with strong luster and no visible wear can be worth several dollars, and in some cases much more. But the real excitement begins when we talk about errors. Mint errors are like accidents frozen in time. They happen during the coin production process, and they can turn an ordinary penny into something highly collectible. For the 1978 Lincoln penny, some known errors include double die variations, off-center strikes, and coins with unusual planchet issues. The double die error occurs when the coin's design is stamped more than once, slightly misaligned, creating a noticeable doubling effect on the letters or numbers. On a 1978 penny, this might show up in the date or in the words Liberty or In God We Trust. These errors can be subtle, but once spotted, they can significantly increase the coin's value. Off-center strikes are another fascinating type of error. Imagine a coin that wasn't properly aligned during the striking process, causing part of the design to be missing while the rest is shifted to one side. Depending on how dramatic the misalignment is, these coins can be worth anywhere from a few dollars to hundreds. Then there are planchet errors, where the metal blank itself has imperfections before it's even struck. This could result in unusual textures, missing sections, or odd shapes. Each one is unique, making it especially appealing to collectors. Now let's talk about real value, because this is where curiosity turns into excitement. A typical circulated 1978 no-mint mark penny might only be worth its face value, or slightly more. But in uncirculated condition, these coins can sell for anywhere between $1 and $10, depending on their quality. That may not sound life-changing, but remember, these are coins that many people still have in jars at home. When you step into higher grades, things become more interesting. Coins graded MS-65 or higher by professional grading services can sell for $20, $50, or even more. And if you find a rare error combined with a high-grade condition, the price can climb significantly. There have been cases where error coins from this era have sold for hundreds of dollars at auction. While not every 1978 penny will reach those levels, the possibility is what keeps collectors searching. So, how do you know if you have a valuable one? Start by looking closely at the coin's surface. Is it shiny, with a bright copper color? Or is it dull and worn? Coins with original luster are always more desirable. Next, check the details. Are Lincoln's hair and facial features sharp and clear? Is the Lincoln memorial on the back well defined? Then, examine the coin for errors. Use a magnifying glass if possible. Look for doubling in the text, unusual shapes, or anything that seems off. Even small differences can matter. Also, pay attention to the color. Collectors classify copper coins into 3 categories: red, red-brown, and brown. A fully red 1978 penny, especially in high grade, is far more valuable than a brown one that has darkened over time. Now, what about fakes? The good news is that counterfeit 1978 pennies are relatively rare, simply because the coin itself isn't extremely valuable in most cases. However, altered coins do exist. Some people may try to modify coins to make them look like error varieties. To avoid being misled, always compare your coin to verified examples. If you believe you have something special, consider having it authenticated by a professional grading service. These organizations can confirm whether your coin is genuine and assign it a grade, which can greatly increase its market value. Here's a fun detail that surprises many people. In 1978, the United States Mint produced billions of pennies. That's billions with a B. Yet today, finding one in perfect condition is surprisingly difficult. Why? Because most of them were used heavily in everyday transactions. They were tossed into cash registers, dropped on the ground, and stored in jars without protection. Another interesting fact is that the Lincoln Memorial design remained in use until 2008, making it one of the longest-running coin designs in U.S. history. The 1978 penny is part of that long legacy, representing a time when coins were still made primarily of copper, giving them a weight and feel that modern pennies lack. Collectors today love the 1978 no-mint mark penny not because it is the rarest coin ever made, but because it represents opportunity. It's a reminder that valuable finds don't always come from ancient history or rare gold pieces. Sometimes, they come from the most ordinary places: your pocket, your drawer, or a forgotten jar on a shelf. There's also a sense of nostalgia attached to these coins. For many people, the 1970s were a time of change, culture, and everyday simplicity. Holding a 1978 penny is like holding a small piece of that era, a connection to the past that still exists in the present. And perhaps that's the real magic of coin collecting. It turns something small and often ignored into something meaningful and exciting. It invites you to slow down, look closer, and ask questions. Where did this coin travel? Who held it before you? And could it be worth more than you think? So the next time you come across a 1978 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a moment to examine it. Look at the details, the color, the condition, because hidden within that small copper coin could be a story, a surprise, or even a value that most people would never expect. And who knows? The next great discovery might already be in your hands, just waiting for you to notice it. What if the next penny you find in your pocket isn't just spare change, but a small piece of history that could be worth far more than 1 cent. Today, we're diving into a coin that millions of people have seen, but very few have truly understood, the 1979 D Mint Mark Lincoln Penny. At first glance, the 1979 D Lincoln Penny looks completely ordinary. It's a small, copper-colored coin featuring the familiar face of Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. It was minted in Denver, which is what the small d under the date stands for. Billions of these coins were produced, and for decades, they quietly circulated through everyday transactions. But behind that ordinary appearance lies a deeper story, one of history, subtle details, and hidden potential. To understand this coin, we need to go back to 1979. The United States was going through a period of economic uncertainty. Inflation was rising, energy prices were unstable, and the value of money itself was constantly being questioned. Despite all this, the Lincoln penny remained one of the most widely produced coins in the country. The design had already been in use for 70 years, first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln. By 1979, the Lincoln penny had become more than just currency. It was a symbol of American continuity. While other coins changed designs or compositions over time, the penny stayed relatively consistent. The 1979 version continued the tradition, still featuring the iconic portrait designed by Victor David Brenner on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, created by Frank Gasparo. Now let's talk about what makes the 1979 D penny unique. First, the composition. These pennies were made primarily of copper, about 95% copper and 5% zinc. This is important because just a few years later, in 1982, the U.S. Mint changed the composition to mostly zinc due to rising copper costs. That makes pre-1982 pennies, including the 1979 D, part of the last generation of true copper coins. If you hold one in your hand, you'll notice its weight feels slightly more solid compared to modern pennies. It weighs about 3.11 grams, and it has a richer, warmer tone than the newer zinc coins. These small details might seem insignificant, but for collectors, they matter a lot. The design itself is also worth a closer look. On the front, Lincoln's profile faces right with the word Liberty to the left and the date 1979 to the right. Just below the date, you'll find the small D Mint mark, indicating it was struck at the Denver Mint. Above Lincoln's head is the phrase, "In God We Trust." On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands in the center, detailed enough that if you look closely, you can even see a tiny representation of Lincoln sitting inside. The words United States of America and E Pluribus Unum appear above, while 1 cent is displayed prominently at the bottom. Now here's where things start to get interesting. While billions of 1979 D pennies were minted, not all of them are equal. In fact, certain versions of this coin can be surprisingly valuable, especially if they have unique errors or are in exceptional condition. One of the most talked about aspects of the 1979 D penny is the possibility of mint errors. These errors can happen during the striking process and can turn an ordinary coin into something collectors are willing to pay serious money for. For example, some 1979 D pennies show what's called a double die effect, where parts of the design appear slightly duplicated. This can be seen in the lettering or the date. It's subtle, but once you know what to look for, it becomes noticeable. Coins with clear doubling can attract much higher prices than regular versions. Another type of error involves off-center strikes. This happens when the coin isn't properly aligned during minting, causing part of the design to be missing or shifted. The more dramatic the error, the more valuable the coin can become. There are also cases of die cracks, where small lines appear on the coin due to wear and tear on the minting equipment. While not as valuable as major errors, these still add uniqueness and interest for collectors. But even without errors, condition plays a huge role in value. Most 1979 D pennies you'll find today are worn from years of circulation. They might be dull, scratched, or faded. These are usually worth just a few cents at most. However, if a 1979 D penny has been preserved in near-perfect condition, what collectors call uncirculated or mint state, its value can increase significantly. Coins graded at the highest levels, like MS-65 or above, can sell for several dollars, and in some cases even higher depending on demand and eye appeal. There have been auctions where high-grade 1979 D pennies fetched impressive prices. While they may not reach the thousands like some rare coins, top-condition examples can still surprise people. A well-preserved coin with strong luster and no visible marks can stand out in a big way. So how can you tell if you have a valuable 1979 D penny? Start by checking the mint mark. Look just below the date and confirm that there's a D. Then examine the overall condition. Is the surface shiny or dull? Are there scratches or discoloration? The better the condition, the higher the potential value. Next, look closely for any unusual features. Use a magnifying glass if you can. Check the lettering, the numbers in the date, and the edges of the design. If anything looks doubled, misaligned, or unusual, you might be looking at an error coin. Also, pay attention to the color. Copper coins can develop different tones over time, ranging from bright red to deep brown. Collectors often prefer coins that still have a reddish tone, as it suggests less exposure and better preservation. It's also important to be cautious. While rare coins can be valuable, there are also many altered or damaged coins that might look unusual but aren't actually worth more. If you believe you have something special, it's always a good idea to have it evaluated by a professional coin grading service. Here's a fun fact that surprises many people. Even though the 1979 D penny is not considered extremely rare, it's part of a group of coins that are becoming harder to find in high-quality condition. That's because most of them were used heavily in everyday transactions and weren't saved. Another interesting detail is that these pennies were made before the major shift in coin production during the early 1980s. That makes them part of a transitional era in U.S. coin history, where rising costs forced the mint to rethink how coins were made. Collectors today appreciate the 1979 D penny not just for its potential value, but for what it represents. It's a connection to a specific moment in time, a snapshot of American history captured in metal. It reminds us of an era before digital payments, when coins were an essential part of daily life. There's also a sense of accessibility that makes this coin appealing. Unlike rare gold coins or limited edition releases, the 1979 D penny is something almost anyone can find. It could be sitting in a jar, hidden in a drawer, or mixed in with everyday change. That's part of the excitement. The idea that something small and overlooked could hold unexpected value is what draws many people into coin collecting. It turns an ordinary moment into a treasure hunt. And for experienced collectors, the 1979 D penny offers a chance to search for perfection. Finding one in pristine condition with sharp details and original luster can be incredibly satisfying. So the next time you come across a penny, take a second look. Check the date. Look for that small D. Examine the details, because while most 1979 D pennies are just 1 cent, a few of them carry a story, and sometimes a value that goes far beyond their face. In a world where so much is digital and fast-paced, coins like the 1979 D Lincoln penny remind us to slow down and pay attention. They prove that history isn't always found in museums. Sometimes, it's right there in your hand waiting to be noticed. And who knows? The next time you reach into your pocket, you might not just be holding change. You might be holding a piece of the past with a story still waiting to be discovered. Imagine finding a simple penny in your pocket, a coin you've probably ignored hundreds of times, only to discover it might be worth far more than 1 cent. Not because it looks special at first glance, but because of something it doesn't have. No mint mark, just a quiet detail hiding in plain sight. Today, we're uncovering the story of the 1985 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that millions of people have handled, but very few have truly examined. At first glance, the 1985 Lincoln penny looks completely ordinary. It features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front, a design that has been part of American currency since 1909. On the back, you'll find the classic Lincoln Memorial, a design that remained in use until 2008. Nothing about it seems unusual. The small, copper-colored, and easy to overlook. But when you flip the coin and look closely near the date, something important may be missing. No small letter. No D for Denver. No S for San Francisco. Just a clean space under the year 1985. That absence is what sparks curiosity, and sometimes real value. To understand why, we need to go back to 1985. This was a time when the United States Mint was producing billions of pennies every year. Pennies were still widely used in everyday transactions, and production was high to meet demand. Coins were struck at multiple facilities, including Philadelphia and Denver. By the 1980s, the Philadelphia Mint had started adding a P mint mark to most coins. But interestingly, pennies were an exception. Pennies struck in Philadelphia still carried no mint mark at all. So, in simple terms, a 1985 penny without a mint mark means it was made in Philadelphia. And here's the surprising part. In 1985, the Philadelphia Mint produced over 5.6 billion pennies. That's billions with a B. So technically, the no mint mark version is not rare in terms of quantity. But here's where the story gets interesting. Even though millions exist, only a tiny fraction of those coins remain in exceptional condition today. Most were used, scratched, worn down, or lost over time. And collectors don't just look for coins. They look for condition, quality, and uniqueness. The 1985 penny also came during a transitional period in coin composition. Just a few years earlier, in 1982, the U.S. Mint changed the metal content of pennies. Before that, pennies were made mostly of copper. After the change, they were primarily zinc with a thin copper coating. By 1985, all pennies were made using this newer composition. That means the 1985 penny is mostly zinc, which makes it lighter and more vulnerable to damage like corrosion or bubbling under the surface. This detail matters because finding a 1985 penny in perfect condition is actually harder than you might think. Zinc coins don't age as gracefully as older copper ones. Now let's talk about the design. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right, along with the words, "In God we trust," above, "Liberty" on the left, and the date 1985 on the right. It's a simple but iconic design. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands in the center. If you look very closely, you can even see a tiny depiction of Lincoln sitting inside the memorial. This level of detail on such a small coin has always fascinated collectors. But beyond the standard design, some 1985 no-mint mark pennies have something extra, small mistakes or variations that make them stand out. These are known as mint errors. For example, some collectors have discovered 1985 pennies with double die errors. This happens when the design is accidentally stamped twice in slightly different positions, creating a subtle doubling effect on the letters or numbers. Others have found off-center strikes, where the coin design is not perfectly aligned. Some even show signs of die cracks or unusual textures. These errors are rare compared to the total number produced, and that rarity can increase value significantly. So what are these coins actually worth? For a typical 1985 no-mint mark penny in average circulated condition, the value is still just 1 cent. Maybe a few cents to a collector. But if you find one in uncirculated condition, meaning it looks almost brand new, the value can rise to a few dollars. Sometimes even higher depending on grading. Now, if the coin has a noticeable error, things can change dramatically. Some error coins from 1985 have sold for anywhere between $20 and $200, depending on the type and visibility of the mistake. High-grade coins, professionally graded and preserved in excellent condition, have also reached impressive prices in collector markets. There have even been cases where near-perfect examples graded at the highest levels have sold for over $1,000. Not because they are common, but because they are extremely rare in that level of preservation. That's the key idea here. It's not just about the coin. It's about the condition, the details, and sometimes the story behind it. Now you might be wondering, how can you tell if your 1985 penny is special? Start by checking the mint mark area. If there's no letter under the date, it was minted in Philadelphia. That's your first step. Next, look closely at the surface. Is the coin shiny? Are the details sharp? Or is it worn and dull? Then, examine the letters and numbers. Do they look normal, or do you see doubling, shifting, or unusual shapes? You can also weigh the coin. A standard 1985 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams because of its zinc composition. If the weight is significantly different, it could indicate an error or something unusual. Another important step is authentication. If you believe you have a valuable coin, it's always a good idea to have it checked by a professional grading service. They can confirm whether it's genuine and assign it a grade based on condition. This is important because even small differences in grade can mean big differences in value. Now here's something many people don't realize. Even though billions of these pennies were made, most people never look at them closely. They pass from hand to hand, get dropped in jars, or disappear into circulation without a second thought. That means there's always a chance that valuable coins are still out there, hiding in plain sight. In fact, Some collectors enjoy searching through rolls of pennies from banks, hoping to find hidden gems like error coins or high-grade examples. It's like a treasure hunt, where the prize might already be sitting in your home. Another fun fact is that the Lincoln penny itself has one of the longest-running designs in U.S. history. Introduced in 1909, it has gone through several changes, but the basic concept has remained the same for over a century. The 1985 penny is part of that legacy. It represents a moment in time when coin production was massive, materials had recently changed, and everyday currency was still an important part of daily life. Collectors today love these coins not just for their potential value, but for their connection to history. Each penny tells a story of where it's been, who has held it, and how it has survived over the years. And the no-mint mark version adds a small layer of mystery. It looks incomplete, almost like something is missing. But that absence is exactly what makes people take a second look. That second look is where discovery begins. So the next time you see a penny, don't ignore it. Turn it over. Check the date. Look for that tiny detail under the year. Because sometimes the most ordinary coins can hold the most unexpected surprises. And that 1985 Lincoln penny with no mint mark might just be one of them. What if the penny sitting quietly in your pocket right now isn't just worth 1 cent, but could actually be hiding a story, a mystery, and in some cases, a surprising amount of money? Today, we're looking at a coin that millions of people have seen, but very few have truly understood. The 1991 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. At first glance, this coin looks completely ordinary. It's small, copper-colored, and features the familiar face of Abraham Lincoln on the front. Most people wouldn't even give it a second thought. But collectors know that sometimes the most common-looking coins can hold the most interesting secrets. The 1991 Lincoln penny without a mint mark is one of those coins. To understand why, we need to go back a bit. The Lincoln penny has been part of American life since 1909, created to honor President Abraham Lincoln. By 1991, the coin had already been in circulation for over 80 years. It was a time when pennies were still widely used in everyday transactions, and the U.S. Mint was producing them in massive numbers. In 1991, pennies were struck at multiple mint facilities, including Philadelphia and Denver. Coins from Denver carry a small D mint mark, while coins from Philadelphia traditionally had no mint mark at all. So when you see a 1991 penny without a mint mark, it simply means it was made in Philadelphia. And here's where things get interesting, because the Philadelphia Mint produced a huge number of pennies that year, billions. In fact, most 1991 no-mint mark pennies are extremely common. You could go through a handful of loose change and probably find one without much effort. That's why, at face value, this coin is still just worth 1 cent, but that's not the full story. What makes certain 1991 no-mint mark pennies valuable is not the coin itself, but its condition, its quality, and sometimes its mistakes. Let's talk about condition first. Coins are graded on a scale that measures how well they've been preserved. Most pennies you find in circulation are worn, scratched, or faded. These are considered circulated coins, and they usually don't carry much extra value. But if you happen to find a 1991 penny that looks almost brand new with sharp details, strong color, and no visible wear, you might be holding what collectors call an uncirculated coin. Now, here's the surprising part. High-grade examples of the 1991 no-mint mark penny have sold for far more than 1 cent. In top condition, especially coins graded MS65 or higher, values can jump into the range of a few dollars, sometimes even reaching $10 to $20 depending on demand. And in extremely rare cases where the coin is nearly perfect, prices can go even higher. But condition is only one piece of the puzzle. The real excitement for collectors often comes from errors. Mint errors happen when something goes wrong during the coin production process. These mistakes can create unique variations that make a coin stand out from the millions of others. For the 1991 Lincoln penny, there are a few types of errors that collectors watch for closely. One of the most talked about is the double die error. This happens when the coin's design is stamped slightly off alignment, creating a doubling effect on the letters or numbers. It can sometimes be seen in the word Liberty or in the date itself. Another possible error is an off-center strike. This occurs when the coin blank isn't properly aligned during minting, resulting in a design that looks shifted to one side. The more off-center the strike, the more valuable the coin can become. There are also die cracks, which appear as raised lines across the coin surface, and clipped planchets, where part of the coin is literally missing due to a cutting error. Each of these errors turns an ordinary penny into something unique, and uniqueness is what collectors are always searching for. Now let's talk about real value examples. While most 1991 no-mint mark pennies are worth face value, some have sold for impressive amounts depending on their condition and error types. For example, a high-grade uncirculated coin with strong red color has been known to sell for around $15 to $30. Coins with rare errors, especially visible doubling or major strike issues, can sometimes reach $50 or more. It may not sound like life-changing money, but remember, these coins often come from everyday pocket change. That's what makes the hunt so exciting. But how do you know if the coin you have is real or worth anything at all? First, take a close look at the date. It should clearly read 1991, with no mint mark below it. If you see a D, then it's from Denver, which is a different category. Next, examine the coin's surface. Look for sharp details in Lincoln's face, the lettering, and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. The clearer and more defined the design, the better the condition. Pay attention to the color as well. Fresh pennies have a bright reddish tone, often called red by collectors. As they age, they turn brown. Red coins are generally more valuable than brown ones. Then, check for anything unusual. Look closely at the letters and numbers. Do they appear doubled? Is the design off-center? Are there strange lines or shapes that don't belong? If something looks different, it might be worth taking a closer look, or even having the coin evaluated by a professional grading service. Here's a fun fact that surprises many people. Even though the 1991 penny seems modern compared to older coins, it's now over 3 decades old. That means fewer high-quality examples are still around, especially ones that were never circulated. Another interesting detail is that pennies from this era are made mostly of zinc with a thin copper coating. This composition was introduced in 1982 to reduce costs, making these coins lighter than older solid copper pennies. Because of this, 1991 pennies can sometimes show signs of wear differently, including small bubbles or surface issues if the coating is damaged. Collectors actually look for coins without these flaws, which adds another layer of rarity. So why do collectors still care about a coin like this? It comes down to the thrill of discovery. The idea that something so ordinary could turn out to be special is incredibly powerful. You don't need expensive equipment or rare access. All you need is patience, attention to detail, and a bit of curiosity. That's what keeps collectors searching through jars of old coins, rolls from the bank, and even spare change from the grocery store. Because every now and then, someone finds something unexpected, and the 1991 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is a perfect example of that idea. It's not rare in the traditional sense. It's not made of precious metal. It doesn't immediately stand out, but hidden within billions of coins are a small number that tell a different story, a story of perfect preservation, a story of minting mistakes, a story of value where you least expect it, and that's what makes coin collecting so fascinating. Before we wrap up, here's something to think about. How many coins have passed through your hands without you ever taking a second look? How many small details have gone unnoticed? Because sometimes, the difference between a 1-cent coin and a collectible piece isn't luck, it's awareness, it's knowing what to look for. And it's taking that extra moment to check SO the next time you see a 1991 penny without a mint mark. Don't just ignore it. Turn it over. Look closely. Study the details. Because hidden in plain sight, there might be more to that coin than you ever imagined. And who knows, the next great find could already be in your pocket. What if the next penny you find in your pocket isn't just worth 1 cent, but could actually be hiding a story, a mistake, or even a small fortune? Most people ignore pennies without a second thought. But the 2001 Lincoln penny with no mint mark is one of those coins that quietly sparks curiosity among collectors. And for good reason. At first glance, the 2001 Lincoln penny looks completely ordinary. It carries the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front, a design that has been part of American coinage for generations. On the back, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, a symbol that defined pennies from 1959 until 2008. But when collectors talk about the no-mint mark version, they're referring to something very specific, something that can confuse beginners and intrigue experienced collectors. To understand this coin, we need to go back to how U.S. coins are made. In 2001, pennies were produced at multiple U.S. mint facilities, including Philadelphia and Denver. Coins struck in Denver carry a small D mint mark, while coins from Philadelphia traditionally had no mint mark at all. So when you see a 2001 penny without a mint mark, it simply means it was made in Philadelphia. That might sound common, and in many cases it is. But within that simplicity lies the potential for hidden value. The year 2001 wasn't particularly unusual in terms of mintage. The Philadelphia Mint produced billions of pennies that year. These coins were part of everyday circulation, used in stores, dropped in jars, and passed from hand to hand without much thought. But over time, something interesting happened. As collectors began to study modern coins more closely, they started noticing small variations, subtle errors, and unique characteristics that made certain pennies stand out. Let's talk about the design first. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the year 2001 to the right. The absence of a mint mark under the date tells you it was struck in Philadelphia. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial appears in fine detail, and if you look very closely, you can even see the tiny figure of Lincoln seated inside. The metal composition of the 2001 penny is also important. By this time, pennies were no longer made primarily of copper. Instead, they consist of a zinc core with a thin copper plating. This gives them their familiar color while keeping production costs low. However, this composition also makes them more prone to certain types of errors, especially during the minting process. Now here's where things get interesting. While most 2001 no-mint mark pennies are worth exactly 1 cent, some rare variations and errors can increase their value significantly. Collectors are always on the lookout for coins with striking mistakes. These can include off-center strikes, double dies, broad strikes, or even coins with unusual surface textures. One of the most talked about possibilities with modern pennies is the double die error. This happens when the coin's design is accidentally stamped twice in slightly different positions, creating a noticeable doubling effect on letters or numbers. If a 2001 penny without a mint mark shows clear doubling, especially on the date or the word Liberty, it can attract serious attention from collectors. Another type of error involves the plating. Because these pennies are copper-plated zinc, sometimes the plating can bubble, peel, or appear uneven. While minor imperfections are common and usually not valuable, extreme cases can become collectible. A penny with dramatic plating errors might sell for more than face value, especially if the flaw is visually striking. There are also off-center strikes, where the coin isn't properly aligned during minting. This can result in part of the design missing, creating a unique and sometimes highly collectible piece. The more dramatic the off-center strike, the more desirable it can be, as long as the date is still visible. You might be wondering, are there real examples of these coins selling for meaningful amounts? The answer is yes, but with an important detail. Most standard 2001 no-mint mark pennies are extremely common and sell in bulk for very little. However, error coins or those in exceptional condition can reach higher prices. Coins graded in near-perfect condition, often referred to as mint state grades, can sell for several dollars or more. Rare error versions have been known to fetch significantly higher amounts, sometimes reaching tens or even hundreds of dollars depending on the uniqueness and demand. Condition plays a major role in value. A penny that has never been circulated, with sharp details and no visible wear, is far more attractive to collectors than one that has been used for years. Professional grading services evaluate coins based on their condition, assigning them a grade that helps determine their market value. A high-grade 2001 penny without a mint mark can be surprisingly desirable, especially for collectors building complete sets of Lincoln cents. Now let's talk about how to identify a genuine coin versus something altered or misleading. First, always examine the surface carefully. Genuine mint errors occur during production and have a natural appearance. If something looks scratched, carved, or artificially modified, it's likely not a true error. Pay close attention to the lettering and the date. Use a magnifying glass if possible. Authentic double dies, for example, will show consistent doubling that follows the design, not random marks. Weight and size are also helpful clues. A standard 2001 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams and have a consistent diameter. If a coin feels unusually light, heavy, or oddly shaped without a clear minting explanation, it may not be genuine. Serious collectors often use precise scales and calipers to confirm these details. Here's something many people don't realize. Even though billions of these pennies were made, finding one in truly pristine condition today is not as easy as it sounds. Most have been circulated for years, accumulating scratches, dirt, and wear. That's why uncirculated examples, especially those preserved in coin rolls or collections, can stand out. There are also some fun and surprising facts about modern pennies like this one. For example, it actually costs more than 1 cent to produce a penny. This has been true for years, leading to ongoing debates about whether the penny should continue to be made. Despite that, pennies remain an important part of U.S. currency and a favorite among collectors. Another interesting detail is how the Lincoln penny has evolved over time. The design introduced in 1909 has gone through several changes, but the core image of Abraham Lincoln has remained. The 2001 penny represents part of that long tradition, sitting right in the middle of the Lincoln Memorial era before the design changed in 2009 for the bicentennial. Collectors love coins like the 2001 no-mint mark penny not because they are all rare, but because they offer possibility. It's the idea that something so common could hide something uncommon. It turns everyday pocket change into a kind of treasure hunt. Every coin becomes worth a second look. For beginners, this coin is also a great starting point. It's easy to find, easy to study, and helps build the habit of paying attention to detail. Many experienced collectors started by examining ordinary pennies, slowly learning to recognize what makes a coin special. And that's really the heart of it. The value of a coin isn't just in its metal or its face value. It's in its story, its condition, and sometimes its imperfections. The 2001 Lincoln penny with no mint mark may seem ordinary, but under the right circumstances, it can become something much more interesting. So the next time you come across a penny, don't rush to spend it or toss it aside. Take a closer look. Check the date. Look for a mint mark or the absence of one. Examine the details, the surface, the overall condition. Because hidden among millions of ordinary coins, there's always the chance that one of them tells a story worth far more than a single cent, and who knows? The next one you find might just surprise you. What if the next penny you pick up isn't just 1 cent, but a hidden opportunity waiting to be discovered? Most people overlook modern coins, especially ones from the 2000s. But the truth is, even a 2006 penny with a small D mint mark can carry stories, surprises, and in rare cases, real value that collectors are quietly searching for. Today, we're taking a closer look at the 2006 D mint mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, it looks like any ordinary coin you might find in your pocket change. It's small, copper-colored, and easy to ignore. But behind that simple appearance is a fascinating mix of history, design, and collector interest that makes it far more interesting than most people realize. The 2006 Lincoln penny was produced by the United States Mint as part of its long-running Lincoln Cent series, which began back in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln. By 2006, this coin had already been in circulation for nearly a century, making it one of the most recognizable coins in American history. The D mint mark on this penny tells us it was struck at the Denver Mint, one of the primary facilities responsible for producing coins for circulation across the country in 2006. The United States was in a period of economic stability, and billions of pennies were minted to keep up with demand. The Denver Mint alone produced over 4 billion Lincoln cents that year. That number might make it sound like this coin is extremely common, and in most cases it is. But here's where things get interesting. Within those billions of coins, there are small variations, tiny imperfections, and subtle details that can turn an ordinary penny into something collectors actively search for. The design of the 2006 D Lincoln penny follows the classic look that had been used since 1959. On the front, you'll see the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. Above his head is the word Liberty, and to the right, the date 2006 along with the small D mint mark. The phrase "In God We Trust" curves along the top edge. On the back, the coin features the Lincoln Memorial, a design that remained in use until 2008. If you look very closely, you can even see a tiny representation of Lincoln seated inside the memorial, a detail many people miss entirely. One of the most interesting aspects of the 2006 D penny is its composition. Unlike older pennies made mostly of copper, This coin is actually made from a zinc core with a thin copper plating. This change happened in 1982 as a cost-saving measure. So while it looks like a solid copper coin, it's mostly zinc underneath. This difference becomes important when collectors examine the coin for wear, damage, or unusual features. Now let's talk about what makes some of these pennies stand out. Even though the 2006 D penny is common in general circulation, certain versions of this coin can be much more valuable due to errors or high-grade condition. Mint errors are one of the biggest reasons collectors get excited about modern coins. These errors happen during the production process and can include things like off-center strikes, double dies, die cracks, or missing design elements. For example, a 2006 D penny with a strong double die error can show noticeable doubling in the lettering or numbers. This kind of error is not something you see every day, and when it's clear and well-defined, it can significantly increase the coin's value. Another example is an off-center strike, where the design is not perfectly aligned with the coin's edge. Depending on how dramatic the error is, these coins can attract serious attention from collectors. Condition is another major factor. Most 2006 D pennies have been used in everyday transactions, meaning they show wear, scratches, and discoloration. But a coin that has been preserved in near-perfect condition, known as mint state, can be worth much more than its face value. Coins graded MS-65 or higher, especially those with a strong, bright red color, are considered highly desirable. These are often referred to as red pennies, meaning they have retained their original copper shine without fading to brown in terms of real-world value. Most circulated 2006 D pennies are still worth just 1 cent. But when you move into higher grades or error coins, the story changes. A high-grade 2006 D penny in MS-67 condition can sell for anywhere from $20 to $100, depending on the market and the coin's visual appeal. If you find one with a unique mint error, the value can climb even higher. Some error coins have sold for several $100s, especially if they are rare and well-documented. Collectors often rely on professional grading services to determine a coin's condition and authenticity. These services assign a grade based on factors like luster, strike quality, and the presence of marks or imperfections. A small difference in grade can mean a big difference in value, which is why serious collectors pay close attention to these details. If you're wondering how to identify a valuable 2006 D penny, there are a few simple things to look for. Start by checking the mint mark. The small d should appear clearly on the front of the coin, just below the date. Next, examine the coin under good lighting. Look for any unusual features, such as doubling in the letters, uneven edges, or parts of the design that seem misaligned. Pay attention to the color as well. A bright, reddish coin is generally more desirable than one that has turned dark or brown. You should also weigh the coin if possible. A standard 2006 penny weighs about 2.5 grams. If the weight is significantly off, it could indicate an error or, in rare cases, a counterfeit. While counterfeit pennies are not very common, it's still important to be cautious, especially if you believe you've found something valuable. Here's a fun detail that many people don't realize. The Lincoln Memorial design on the back of the coin was one of the few U.S. coin designs to show the same person on both sides. If you look closely inside the memorial, you can actually see a tiny image of Abraham Lincoln sitting in his chair. It's a small detail, but it adds a unique layer of artistry to the coin. Another interesting fact is that pennies like the 2006 D are often overlooked because they feel too modern to be valuable. Many collectors focus on older coins, assuming that age is the main factor in value. But modern coins can surprise you. With the right combination of condition and rarity, even a relatively recent penny can become a sought-after collectible. Collectors today appreciate the 2006 D Lincoln penny not just for its potential value, but for what it represents. It's part of a long tradition that connects generations of Americans through everyday currency. It also serves as a reminder that valuable items are not always obvious. Sometimes, they're hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to take a closer look. The thrill of coin collecting often comes from this sense of discovery. You never know when a simple coin might turn out to be something special. That's what keeps collectors searching, examining, and learning more about the coins they come across, so the next time you receive change, don't be so quick to toss those pennies aside. Take a moment to look at them, Check the date, the mint mark, and the condition. That small copper-colored coin might just have a story to tell, and possibly a value that goes far beyond 1 cent, because in the world of coin collecting, it's not always the oldest or the rarest coins that matter most. Sometimes it's the ones that everyone else ignores. And the 2006 D Lincoln penny is a perfect example of how even the most ordinary coin can hold a hidden layer of intrigue, waiting to be discovered by the right set of eyes.